So today I am starting a project or a series of projects that have waited for an embarrassingly long time. And by that, I mean over 4 years. So back in February, March of 2021, we finished a complete remodel of this kitchen. It used to look very different. And I will add a link to the entire makeover video in the description if you want to go check that out. But like most DIY projects, there are these little tiny details that are left and waiting for me to finish them for 4 years. So my goal for this week is to take care of all of them and also make a few other additional little organizing projects. So we're gonna do maybe 5 or 6 projects. All of these I expect are simple enough that can be finished in one day. But before we can start diving into the projects, I have to show you all of my little embarrassing things that are still waiting for me. And I have to show you some messes. So let's go. But before we dive into it, if you are new here, I am Anika and I am here to demystify DIY and inspire and empower you to pick up those power tools and build all of the projects. I have a whole bunch of resources, projects, tutorials, and courses to help you, and I will add a link to a few of them in the description below. So be sure to check those out after you've watched this video. So now let's dive into the messes in my kitchen. So first up, I have this drawer, which is the silverware drawer, and it's not too bad. There is this metal drawer organizer that I have had for almost 16, 17 years, and it's starting to rust. It's got scratches. It definitely needs a replacement. But overall, of course, I have this wooden organizer. I've tried to make it work, but we definitely need better organization. But this is not the worst thing. This is actually the best mess. Let me show you my other drawer. Meet this drawer. This is an absolute huge mess. So we definitely need to take care of all of this. We need some kind of organization. And this right here is a K-cup organizer that I actually made on my laser cutter. And I will add a link to that file if you have a laser and if you want to make your own. But I also intend to build one. It's a very simple build. I have a very simple idea. We're going to build a K-cup organizer using just really simple tools. Now we have this drawer right here, which is my Ziploc drawer, which definitely needs help. We've got the kitchen clips, we've got a whole bunch of stuff. So all of this definitely needs to be organized. Now, are you ready for the most embarrassing thing in this kitchen? Is this cabinet. So this cabinet used to have a shelf right here, which doesn't exist anymore. So it's this huge hole that is completely useless, of course. We need to add a new shelf in there, but it's such a deep cabinet that it's really hard to use. So I do have this plastic bin right here that we've been using for some random stuff. But what I really need to do is create some drawers so that we can actually really use this cabinet, because this is just a waste of space. So we're going to start off with the worst drawer. Step 1 is obviously to take everything out, and I actually found some long lost spatula, and in fact I had no idea there were coffee pods back there. So I took everything out and I wiped it all down, found this old rusted screw of I don't know what, but anyway, let's put it all together. So I put my coffee pot organizer back in there so I got an idea of how much space I was working with. And then I started arranging all the things that I wanted to put in that drawer. And it was a little bit of a game of Jenga to figure out exactly what worked. And once I was kind of satisfied with it, I measured exactly how long I needed to cut my boards. I am using 1/4 inch thick oak, which is 2.5 inches wide for this, because oak is pretty sturdy and won't get scratched easily. The cuts need to be very accurate and fit nice and snug inside the drawer, because you don't want it to be moving around every time you open the drawer. I did a little bit of a test fit to make sure everything worked. Everything looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and mark exactly where each of the boards meet, and now I can take it all to my workbench. Of course, first things first, we gotta take off all of those stickers, and a heat gun is my favorite way to do this. And then you just have to kind of sand away the leftover adhesive. Now to put it together, I'm just using wood glue and pin nailer. You can use a super glue type thing, which will dry really fast and you don't have to worry about pin nails or waiting for it to dry, but you have to make sure that you're able to put everything together exactly aligned and exactly perpendicular. Remember, it's really, really important to make sure all of the boards are nice and square to each other. Otherwise, you're going to have this wobbly organizer, which is just not going to lay flat inside your drawer, and that is not going to be fun. Once it's assembled, I left it to dry for a couple of hours, and until then, I'm going to tackle the second drawer, which is really not too bad, but it can definitely be better. So once again, I emptied it out, I figured out the layout, I cut up my boards, did a dry fit, and put it together with wood glue and pin nails, exactly like I did the previous drawer organizer. Once again, want to make sure everything is perpendicular perfectly. Once the glue had cured, I gave it a couple coats of a top coat. A good top coat protects the wood from moisture, stains, and daily wear and tear, especially in the kitchen drawer. And it gives the wood a smooth, wipeable finish that makes cleaning up spills and crumbs really easy. And once the top coat has cured, it is time to put it all together. And this was the most satisfying part. And here's the silverware drawer put together. And since we are on the drawers, let's tackle the coffee pot organizer. For this, I'm using 1/2-inch plywood. This is pre-finished 1/2-inch plywood, which I already had left over from my file cabinet project. So we've got this one big piece, which is the size of the drawer, 2 pieces that are 1.5 inches in width. And now let's mark the grid. I went 1 3/4 inch from each of the edges, and then each hole is going to be 2-inch center to center. So I just went ahead and marked that entire grid across the whole board. Now I'm just going to use a Forstener bit to make the holes for the coffee pods. I found that an 1 3/4 Forstener bit is the perfect size to accommodate all of the coffee pods perfectly. After making about 5 holes, I realized that I needed some more help to make things go a little bit faster and also not cramp my hand. So I switched to the drill press. And this definitely made a difference, and I was able to get all of those 32 holes knocked out in just a couple of hours. And then it was just a matter of attaching the bottom boards using wood glue and finished nails. I'm using pre-finished plywood, so I don't need a top coat, but I highly recommend adding a top coat if your plywood is not finished. And now we just put it in the drawer and load it up. Every pod has its own spot, neatly lined up and ready to grab, and there's no more digging around or wasting time trying to find the right one. Now let's build a Ziploc bag organizer. It's basically, again, 1/2-inch plywood that I cut up to be able to make a box. And I have all of the dimensions that I used for the regular standard size Ziploc bags, and I will add a link to the plans in the description below. So the box is assembled using glue and finished nails. You will notice that I am using a different glue over here, and that is because I have pre-finished faces, which will not work with the wood glue because wood glue needs to be able to absorb into the wood. I will add a link to the glue I'm using below. Once the box is built, it is time to build the dividers, which is once again put together with glue and finished nails. And that goes inside the box that I had built, and I used a clamp to hold it in place and attached using glue and finished nails. Now it's time to work on the top. I'm mapping out exactly where all of the slots that I need to cut will go. And once again, I have all of these details in the plans that are linked in the description below. I made starter holes in all of the boxes to fit my jigsaw blade through, and then I set up my jigsaw and then cut out all of those slots. One thing to remember when using a jigsaw is to always use a straight edge guide anytime you are cutting a straight line, because cutting a perfectly straight line without any guide is humanly impossible. I decided to give the inside edge of all of the slots as well as the outside edge a round over with my router, and this is completely optional. I just think that adding that round over elevates it just a little bit. Now I want to add magnets on all corners of the top to hold it in place, and here is my secret weapon for that, a cheap lipstick. I use it to mark all 4 corners, and then when I press the lid on top, it transfers the corners onto the lid. And now I know exactly where to make the holes for the magnets. So I started a shallow hole for the magnet. You want to make sure that the magnet is sitting with the surface completely flush. And I glued that in place using super glue. I will add a link to the magnets I used. Now on the box, the plywood isn't wide enough to accommodate the magnet, so instead I'm using a screw. I pre-drilled a countersunk hole and added the screw. You want to make sure that the screw is flush with the surface of the plywood. And now it's time to test it out. And the magnets work. There is a resistance to pulling the top off, and I think that's good enough to keep it in place as we pull the Ziploc bags out. Now that everything works, we can attach the bottom. I used hardboard, which I already had, and wood glue and finish nails to attach. I added some non-slip pads on the bottom, and I used my Cricut to make some decals to label the slots. And now it's time to fill it up. I was really curious to see if the magnetic lid would work well with the Ziploc bags, which it does. And now I can clear out my messy Ziploc bag drawer and replace it with this amazing organized solution. And now this drawer looks like it's from a whole different world. Okay, now for this next one, we're gonna tackle this situation right here. These cutting boards look beautiful, but my problem with them is that every time I go to pick one out, they start falling apart. They're like a game of Jenga. So we're gonna build a cutting board stand. For this project, I am using mahogany. I do have the detailed printable plans with the schematics and dimensions linked in the description below. So we have the base and the 4 dividers. Now on the dividers, I wanted to give it a little bit of a curved detail. So I marked about 1 inch up on the side and used my painter's tape to give me the curvature that I wanted to cut, which I cut off using the jigsaw. I am using a top and bottom cut blade, and I absolutely love this blade and highly recommend it because it gives you a clean cut on both faces of the board. After one of the dividers was cut, I used that to draw the shape onto the rest of the dividers, and then I cut those up as well. Now that all of these dividers are cut, you can put them together, and there are variations just because we used a jigsaw to make those cuts. So I'm going to tape them up together and just use my sander to sand down any unevenness that I see or feel, and basically just smooth out all of the sides of the dividers and then sand the front and the back as well. Now to assemble, I'm using a countersinking drill bit. I applied a little bit of glue and aligned the first divider onto the base. I clamped it together and then made my countersunk hole and added a 1 1/4 inch wood screw. You do want to make sure that the wood screw goes underneath the surface. Now, it is important to wipe off as much of the wood glue as possible because later it's going to be really tight to come in there and wipe off any glue. Now for the spacing, one of the dividers is at 1.5 inch spacing, so I am using 2 1x2 boards to create that spacing and align the divider and attach that using countersinking wood screws. Next up, I have the spacing at 1 inch. For this, I am using 1/2 inch plywood strips, so I have 2 of them. So now I can clamp that next divider in place and attach that as well. Now for the final divider, that's pretty straightforward. You can just align it to the edge and attach it as well. And that's pretty much it. It's built. I applied an oil-based finish to bring out the rich color of the mahogany. And that is the cutting board stand. It displays the cutting boards and it keeps all of them in place, so there is no more kitchen Jenga. Now let's tackle that cabinet. Now, one of the problems with this is that this hinge right here butts out so much from the back of the cabinet there. So any drawer that I put in here has to be able to clear this. So I did a bit of trial and error, and I found that I need to have a 2x4 and a 1/2 inch sheet of plywood over here. And that's when I put this drawer slide here, it clears the hinge, so it easily slides back and forth without hitting the hinge. So we're gonna have to attach this over here and then install the drawer. Same thing up here as well for the upper level drawer. And second, on this end as well, there is a little bit of a lip with the face frame. So I'm gonna need a 1/2 inch plywood right here so that I can attach the drawer slide and it clears the edge. Now with all of this in place, I can measure this exact width, and that's going to be the width that I'm going to use to calculate the dimensions of the drawer. So that is 11 1/8 of an inch, but you have to remember to subtract 1 inch for the drawer slide's thickness. So our drawer itself is going to be 10 1/8 inch wide. To build the pull-out drawers or pull-out shelves, I am using 1/2 inch pre-finished plywood, which I already had a bunch of cutoffs left from the previous projects. I ripped them all down to 2-inch pieces, and that is enough to build the 2 drawers that I needed to build. You can also use a circular saw with a rip cut guide to cut it off of a larger sheet of plywood. Now to put it together, it's like any other box. I'm going to use glue and finish nails to put it together. This is a really small drawer and it's not really going to hold a lot of weight, so just glue and finish nails should work perfectly. Of course, always remember to check for square. Once I knew everything was square, I attached the bottom 1/4 inch plywood using wood glue and finish nails. And we've got the drawer. Now to install, I started by attaching the 2x4 boards to one side of the cabinet for the offset. I used a 2x4 spacer and attached the upper 2x4, making sure that it was level. I knew that it was going to be challenging to install the drawer slides inside that narrow cabinet. So instead, I decided to try an idea that I had. I had 4 boards of exactly equal size that were going to be attached to the cabinets where I would attach the drawer slides. So I marked exactly where the drawer slides would go, and I made sure to keep track of the direction and make sure everything was aligned. And I attached one part of the drawer slides onto the mounting boards, and then I attached the other part of the drawer slides onto the drawers. Again, super important to make sure everything is measured perfectly and aligned. And now the key is to make sure that as you attach the mounting boards inside the cabinets, they are level as well. The bottom ones are pretty straightforward. I had made sure that the cabinet itself was level, so you can just set them down and attach, and that works just fine. Attaching the upper mounting boards was a little bit more challenging because I had to make sure it was supported and level. But once I got one screw in, making it level and attaching it was actually not that bad. And the upper drawer works as well. So really the key to making all of this work is to make sure that you are really precise in your measurements and everything is attached level. And now that completely useless cabinet is super functional with 2 slide out shelves. And there you have it. Super simple projects that are quick and easy to make that you can make in an afternoon or some in even under a couple of hours. They're simple projects, but they make such a huge impact on the functionality of the kitchen. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like this and subscribe for more DIY inspiration. And let me know in the comments which of these projects are you excited to try first. Happy building, and I will see you on the next one.